All right, welcome back. This is part 2 of the video, lesson number 3, the review. 22 through 26, they look a lot harder than they really are. It's just asking you to find what the angle measurement is. You want to give it in degrees and radians. So on number 22, that is the cosine inverse of 1/2. They're just asking what angle measurement gives a cosine of 1/2. Well, you want to look at your x-coordinate. So I look where my x-coordinate is 1/2. It is at 60 degrees, which is pi over 3. And it is also happening at 5 pi over 3 and 300 degrees. Let's go on and do the next one. So on number 23, they're asking what angle measurement gives a sine value of radical 2 over 2. Well, that's going to be where we look at our y-coordinate, and that is going to happen right here at 45 degrees, pi over 4, and at 3 pi over 4, or 135 degrees. On 24, they're asking us the tangent, and remember, tangent is your y-coordinate over your x-coordinate. And on that one, it is going to be, I believe it is when you have 1/2 all over radical 3 over 2. You simplify that down and you get 1 over radical 3. Rationalize. And you get radical 3 over 3. And that is happening in quadrant 1 with 60 degrees, pi over 3. And it is also going to happen in quadrant 3, so 1 and 3, at 4 pi over 3 and 240 degrees. Let's go on to number 25. So on 25, it's asking us what angle measurement, or what sine measurement gives us a -1. Well, you're looking where your y-coordinate is -1. That's only going to happen one spot. They wanted degree measurements there too, at 270 degrees and 3 pi over 2. Let's look at our last one, cosine of 0. Where is our x-coordinate 0? Well, 2 places. 270 degrees, 3 pi over 2, and 90 degrees, or pi over 2. All right, let's go ahead, and we need to simplify. So that means that we just take it and make it as simple as possible. So let's go ahead and do 27 first. And on that one, I'm going to start with cosecant x, secant x minus tangent x. Well, when we do these, it's always best to put them in terms of sine and cosine. Well, cosecant is 1 over sine. Secant is 1 over cosine. And tangent is sine over cosine. Well, I look at this and I realize my common denominator is going to be sine x cosine x. So I'm going to go ahead and get a common denominator right now and multiply this by sine x over sine x. I don't know if you can hear a husky crying in the background, but he loves trig identities. Let's go ahead and simplify that, and I'm going to get 1 over sine x cosine x. That's going to, got my x right there, and that is going to be minus sine squared. Multiply those two right there. and I'm just gonna go ahead and put it as one fraction right now. Well, I look over at my Pythagorean identities, and I look at this top one. Sine squared plus cosine squared equals 1. Well, if I were to subtract sine squared from both sides, I'd be left with cosine squared. So that is cosine squared x over sine x cosine x. There's 2 cosines in the numerator. It's going to cancel out, and I'm left with cosine x over sine x, which is cotangent x. So that's your answer to 27. Let's go ahead and go to 28. On 28, I start with 1 minus sine squared. Again, I've got sine squared theta. Almost forgot my theta. Let's make that a little better. Sine squared theta plus cosine squared theta. Almost forgot my s there. Equals 1. Well, it's really close to 1 minus sine squared theta. If I just subtracted sine from both sides, cosine squared theta is 1 minus sine squared theta. So I'm just going to go ahead, and I'm not going to write the original problem down this time. I'm going to start with cosine squared. That's my numerator. And then in the denominator, I've got cosecant squared minus 1. And if I look right here, if I were to subtract 1 from both sides, I'd be left with cotangent squared theta. All right, we're almost there. What I'm going to do now is write everything in terms of sine and cosine. So I'm going to still leave that cosine squared alone. And here, cotangent is cosine squared over sine squared. Well, what I'm doing there is I'm taking and I'm dividing by a fraction. If you're dividing by a fraction, that's the same as multiplying by the reciprocal. So I'd have cosine squared theta over 1 times sine squared theta over cosine squared theta. Those cosines cancel, and I'm left with sine squared theta. So that's 28. Let's go on to 29. On 29, got cotangent theta minus cosine cubed, cosecant cubed. Now that one gets a little bit ugly. Let's take a look and see if we can make that look a little bit better. Cotangent. That is really just cosine over sine. Cosine cubed, I'm going to leave that alone for the moment. And cosecant is 1 over sine. Well, that's nice. Things work out nicely that I've got the same common denominator, because when I multiply that, I'm going to end up with cosine theta over sine theta, and that becomes cosine cubed over sine theta. So I'm just going to go ahead. Let's make that line look a little better. Minus cosine cubed theta, and that's still over sine. Well, looks like I have a common factor. I'm going to try factoring that out. So cosine theta, and I'll be left with 1 minus cosine squared theta. Starting to think of my Pythagorean identity. 1 minus cosine would be sine squared. So I'm going to have cosine theta times sine squared theta over sine theta. Looks like one of those sine thetas are going to cancel out, and I'll be left with cosine theta, sine theta. All right, let's do our last one of 30. So on 30, I've got cosecant, cosine, cotangent, secant, and cotangent. All right, looks like we're going to have to do a lot of rewriting in terms of sine and cosine. So cosecant is sine, try that again, 1 over sine. And I'm going to leave that cosine alone. Cotangent is going to be cosine over sine. I'm forgetting my x's. I need to put those in. Then down in the denominator, secant is 1 over cosine. And cotangent is cosine over sine. Oh, I see a small mistake I made there when I was thinking of x's. This cosine right here should be over 1. All right. So sorry about the handwriting. It's not the best. We're going to go ahead, and it looks like we can, we're going to have the same common denominator in the numerator, which is sine x. So I'm going to have cosine x over sine x plus cosine x over sine x. That's all over 1 over sine x. So it looks like we are going to be able to do some canceling. I'm going to go ahead and write down every single step. Cosine over sine plus cosine over sine would be 2 cosine over sine. And I'm dividing by 1 over sine, which is the same as multiplying by the reciprocal. Looks like those are going to cancel. And I get 2 cosine x. The trick on that one is remembering when you add like terms, which is what you have right there where I just put those check marks, you're adding the coefficients in front. So it'd be the same as 1 cosine plus 1 cosine is 2 cosines. All right, hope you enjoyed.